Thank you, President Durkee, Secretary-Treasurer Bertelli, members of the General Executive Board, delegates, guests, brothers and sisters. It is an honor to present to the 40th Constitutional Convention of the BCTGM the legislative and political report for the period 2014 through 2017. At the beginning of my report to the 39th Constitutional Convention, I stated that the legislative and political landscape of this country had gone through dramatic changes during the previous 4 years. Little did we know that that was nothing compared to what we have seen in our politics in the last 4 years, particularly the last 2. 4 years ago, in this very room, while the convention was in session, we announced that our brothers and sisters in Memphis, who had been locked out for 10 months by Kellogg's, would soon be going back to work. These proud brothers and sisters went back to work because of their courage and because of this international union's tenacity and determination to see that fight through and last one day longer than Kellogg's. We must remember also that they went back to work because the year before, the labor movement demanded that the Democratic leadership of the Senate confirm President Obama's appointments to the National Labor Relations Board, so that we would have a majority of the board and a general counsel who would enforce the letter and spirit of the National Labor Relations Act and protect the legitimate rights of workers on the job. And because the labor movement was unified and committed to success, because we wouldn't back down, because we told the Senate leadership we would not wait any longer, we got a good majority on the National Labor Relations Board. We got an outstanding general counsel, someone who had previously been a general counsel to an international union, and who currently is at the law firm which represents our international union now. These appointments were critical in getting our members back to work in Memphis 4 years ago. That, brothers and sisters, is what can be accomplished when the people we help elect to office actually stand up for workers, our families, and our communities. That is the power of labor's grassroots action. You make it happen, and we thank you for that very much. Now, those we help elect don't always like doing what is right for working people because they get pressure from big corporations, Wall Street, the big banks, and billionaire industrialists like the Koch brothers. To that we say, too bad. We tell these politicians that the labor movement worked hard to help them get elected so that they would go to Washington and fight for working men and women and the middle class. And we always demand accountability from the people we help elect. This is exactly what we did on fast-track trade legislation in 2015 and the horrendous Trans-Pacific Partnership TPP trade deal in 2016. The fights against fast-track and TPP showed labor solidarity at its finest. It showed once again what can be accomplished when the entire labor movement, from the shop floors to the International Union headquarters, comes together united in solidarity. In the fight to stop fast-track, we were up against the most powerful financial, corporate, and political forces in the world, including the President of the United States. Corporate America spent millions to pass fast-track. Why? Because they knew that fast-track was the key to more Wall Street, corporate-driven trade agreements like NAFTA, CAFTA, and the granddaddy of them all, TPP. But even with all of this power and influence aligned against working people, it still took underhanded legislative maneuvers at the 11th hour in both the House and Senate to squeak fast-track through. We did not win the fast-track battle, but all of the hard work and solidarity that went into the fight provided the foundation for us to win the war against TPP. The labor movement didn't fold up our tent after the fast-track votes. No, we came together more determined than ever when the President and Republican leadership in Congress pushed hard for TPP in late 2016, but they got nowhere. Senators and representatives of both parties saw what the labor movement accomplished on fast-track. They saw in the 2016 elections exactly what workers across this country had to say about 25 years of disastrous trade deals that shifted billions of dollars to Wall Street, the big banks, and multinational corporations, and left workers, families, and communities devastated from 60,000 closed factories and the loss of more than 1 million good middle-class manufacturing jobs. The BCTGM and our members in the U.S. and Canada know all too well the pain and suffering caused by lousy trade and tax policies that reward companies that move our good high-wage jobs to Mexico and other low-wage countries. We have seen our jobs at Nabisco and Kellogg's and Hershey and Nestle and others shipped offshore. That is why, when President Durkee sent out an urgent call to action to all of our local unions and members to stop Fast Track, your response was extraordinary. You mobilized, you educated, you hand-billed, you rallied, you called your representatives and senators. Ours was a major part of a powerful labor voice on this critical issue. So, when the same economic and political forces wanted to saddle working people with TPP, it was labor's voice that was ringing in the ears of everyone in Congress for over a year after the Fast Track vote. TPP never even came up for a vote because of the work done by a unified labor movement. BCTGM local unions and our members delivered big time on Fast Track and TPP, and we thank you for that very much. And just to set the record straight, it was an energized and determined labor movement that killed TPP in 2016. Donald Trump likes to take credit, but the truth is, he was just there in January 2017 to sign the coroner's report on the deceased TPP. Brothers and sisters, over the past 4 years, on the legislative issues that directly impact the standard of living and quality of life of our members, the BCTGM was always up for the fight. That is the power of BCTGM grassroots action. That is BCTGM pride. Brothers and sisters, you make this happen, and we thank you for that. As we always say, elections have consequences. For that reason, our executive officers, with the full support of our outstanding General Executive Board, have had the BCTGM right in the thick of labor's political action programs over the past 4 years, on the shop floors and in the break rooms, at the plant gates and at our neighbors' front doors, on the phones and at the polls. And despite all of the economic challenges our members have faced over the last 4 years, you have continued to contribute and build BCTGM PAC, keeping it strong, which is critical to this union's ability to financially support those candidates who stand with us. This is vital to maintaining the BCTGM's effectiveness in the political arena. When we left this hall 4 years ago, we knew the political landscape was tough. We knew the anti-union corporate political forces were licking their chops to gain control of the Senate like they had the House 4 years earlier. So the BCTGM committed to doing what we always do: dig in, stand shoulder to shoulder with the rest of the labor movement and our allies in the progressive community. Under President Durkee's leadership and direction, the BCTGM and our local unions did excellent work on the Labor 2014 program. Labor did its job. Union household turnout outperformed the general public in almost every battleground state. The problem was, too many candidates didn't do their job. The result was a right-wing takeover of the Senate. Too many Democratic candidates for the Senate in 2014 did not run on an agenda for shared prosperity, labor's agenda, the agenda the voters wanted. They ran on trying to be independent of President Obama. Politics 1.0, you cannot run away from the president of your party. So run on what you believe in. Stand with workers. Stand with the middle class. Stand with labor. The Democratic candidates who did that won. The ones who wilted and ran scared lost. We saw a similar situation in Canada in the 2015 parliamentary elections. People were fed up with the Harper government and its pro-corporate policies and the corporate greed that it spawned. They were concerned about rising income inequality, the loss of good middle-class jobs, the deterioration of the manufacturing sector, and attacks on their health care system. Working families and the middle class in Canada were calling for a progressive agenda, just as the Canadian labor movement was. The situation was tailor-made for the NDP, the party closest to the labor movement, to win big and transform the Canadian government from pro-corporation to pro-worker. But here's what happened. The candidate of the NDP, Mulcair, backed down. He was leading the race the month before the elections, but he backed off and would not go all in on the progressive agenda, the workers' agenda. That opened the door for Trudeau, the candidate of the Liberal Party, which is far more corporate-centered than the NDP. They seized the progressive middle-class agenda. Trudeau won in a landslide. Unfortunately for our Canadian brothers and sisters, Trudeau hasn't done very much at all for workers and unions in Canada. A golden opportunity lost. And most notoriously, we look at the 2016 U.S. presidential election. Voters, particularly working people, were demanding a new direction for our country. Working people had enough of a broken political system in Washington, enough of politicians of both parties siding with Wall Street and the big banks and corporations to the harm of working families, enough of stagnant wages, enough of lousy trade deals that sent their jobs to Mexico, enough of employers using the threat of moving jobs to Mexico as a hammer at the bargaining table. Donald Trump read the polls. He saw this anger and frustration too. So what did he do? He essentially ran on much of labor's agenda, especially on the issue of lousy trade deals and lost manufacturing jobs. He said he would be a great friend to workers and unions. When Donald Trump got elected, President Durkee said that the BCTGM would judge the Trump administration on its record. If the administration acted on behalf of working families and unions, we would be supportive. And when the administration took actions harmful to our members' interest and our union, we would fight back and fight back hard. So let's look at the record of the Trump administration since taking office in January 2017. Has this administration been a friend to workers and unions? Well, a friend of workers and unions would not have replaced pro-worker National Labor Relations Board members, members we fought so hard to get appointed, with corporate attorneys who do not share labor's values when it comes to the enforcement of the nation's labor laws. A friend of workers and unions would not have nominated a multimillionaire, viciously anti-union fast food industry boss, Andrew Puzder, to be Secretary of Labor, a nomination the labor movement was able to defeat. A friend of workers and unions would not have joined forces with the Republican leadership in Congress to try multiple times to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Their plans were nothing more than a massive transfer of wealth from working people to the richest in our country. They want a health care system that would have left those with the greatest health care needs out in the cold: seniors, older workers, those with pre-existing conditions, and the least fortunate in our society. They want a system that would lead to wholesale cuts in Medicare and Medicaid. And once again, it was the labor movement that led the pushback and helped defeat these Republican plans. A friend of workers and unions would not have put forth a federal budget that cuts funding to enforce workplace health and safety laws and regulations, would not make it harder for the government to punish employers who break these laws. A friend of workers and unions would not have had his Treasury Secretary, just a few months after taking office, announce at a meeting of corporate and Wall Street executives that the border adjustment tax was off the table. For our union, a border adjustment tax would have been a hard shot at all of our employers who have taken our members' jobs and sent them to Mexico, like Nabisco Mondelez. A friend of workers and unions would not have helped push through Congress a tax plan that AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka described as nothing but an attack on workers. a plan that gives billions of dollars of tax giveaways to the richest in our country and big corporations that outsource jobs to low-wage countries. A friend of workers and unions would not be attacking the rights and jobs of our union brothers and sisters in the public sector at the federal, state, and local levels. A friend of workers and unions would not be filling the Supreme Court and other federal courts with judges who have long records of ruling against the interest of workers, unions, and the middle class, and for corporations. This is the record of the Trump administration so far. It is not a record of support at all for workers and unions, not by any stretch. Now, on the issue of trade, this administration has been more willing to listen to and engage with labor than the previous administration. Our union, through President Durkee and his position on the U.S. Labor Advisory Committee on Trade Policy, has been an important part of labor's full engagement in the NAFTA renegotiations. Of course, the real test for the Trump administration on the NAFTA rewrite will be in the final product. Will the new NAFTA have strong, enforceable labor standards? Will it result in legitimate collective bargaining rights for Mexican workers and, in turn, higher wage standards in that country? Will it make it less financially attractive for employers to send our members' jobs to Mexico to exploit that country's low-wage economy? These are the tests, and we will soon be finding out the answers. Brothers and sisters, the challenges and struggles our union and our members have faced in the legislative and political arenas over the last 4 years remind me of a country song from a few years back titled, "You Find Out Who Your Friends Are." Yes, we have had too many politicians let us down. They promise one thing and do another. They don't show up when we need them the most. But we also have had many who have displayed the finest qualities of true friendship. People like Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio and Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon, Congressman John Lewis of Georgia, and Congressman Keith Ellison of Minnesota. Brothers and sisters, these are true friends. They are always there for the BCTGM when we need them, whether it's on legislation or in our battles with corporations like Kellogg's and Nabisco. But you see, these friendships don't just happen. They are built over time. They are built at the local level by you and those you represent. Brothers and sisters, you are the foundation, the heart and soul of this union's political and legislative program. The political and legislative accomplishments the BCTGM has achieved over the last 4 years would not have been possible without your hard work, and we can't thank you enough for that. Brothers and sisters, we will go forth from this convention as determined as ever to achieve our legislative and political goals over the next 4 years under the strong and principled leadership of our executive officers and our outstanding General Executive Board. Most immediately, we will continue the BCTGM's leadership role in the fight for federal legislation that protects and preserves the hard-earned pension benefits of our members and our retirees. From the day he introduced the Butch-Lewis Act last November, our good friend Senator Sherrod Brown has looked to President Durkee and our union for support and leadership in the fight to protect workers' pensions. And the BCTGM has responded. Nearly 6,000 active members and retirees have contacted Congress and told them to protect our pensions. We earn them, we deserve them, and we're not backing off until quality, effective pension legislation is passed and signed into law in this country. You should take great pride in knowing just how much respect this union and the B&C Fund have in Congress on the pension preservation issue. We will need you to keep up the pressure over the next several months. As the NAFTA renegotiations play out in the coming weeks and months, the BCTGM will continue to stand with the AFL-CIO and other affiliates in a united front. We will demand that the new NAFTA benefits workers, not Wall Street, and multinational corporations. We will need you to keep up the pressure on this as well. And with the critical 2018 midterm elections right around the corner, the BCTGM will once again do our part to advance Labor's political program. We will work to elect candidates who will fight for the interest and rights of working people in the middle class so that we can change the direction of this country. We will work for candidates who are proud to be seen with organized labor all the time, not just when it's convenient. And we know that you will respond and be a crucial part of Labor's political program this year. Brothers and sisters, these certainly are odd political times, to say the least. Most Washington insiders and so-called political experts still have no idea how to react to the political earthquake that took place in November 2016. But for the BCTGM, we have always known what we need to do. As President Durkee says, we keep moving forward. We stick to our mission, our purpose, and our principles as an organization. And regardless of who the President of the United States is, or who the Canadian Prime Minister is, regardless of which political party is running the U.S. Congress or the Canadian Parliament, our goal as an organization remains constant: to work through the political and legislative process to serve our members, our families, our communities, and our two great countries. And as long as we stay united in solidarity, as long as we are willing to last one day longer than our political adversaries, as long as we wage the good fight in the legislative and political arenas for economic and social justice for working people in our two countries, as long as we organize, educate, resist, and persist, we will prevail and prosper as an organization as we have for 132 years. And under this international union's strong leadership, and with our great members, let no one doubt that we will. Thank you, President Durkee. That concludes my report to the 40th Constitutional Convention of the BCTGM.